Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a stack of source material on a really fascinating and deceptively simple system for making better decisions.
It's a method our sources call, and it is a bit grand, the applied philosophy of pause and choose.
Grand, yes, but I think for a good reason. This whole framework seems designed to cut right past all the complex psychological theory.
It does. It moves directly to the practical, almost mechanical steps you can execute right now. It's really focused on how you get to a clear choice, not what the choice should be.
Uh, and it kicks off with this really striking claim. It basically says that most of the mistakes we make, personal, professional, you name it, they happen for one simple reason.
That we don't pause.
Exactly. We just don't pause. We fail to put that tiny micro gap between what happens and how we react, and apparently that's where all the trouble starts.
It immediately sets up the pause as the number one point of intervention. If mistakes come from reacting too fast, then a structured pause is the absolute non-negotiable first step.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this two-part mechanism, pause, and then choose, and to really get at why the sources are so insistent on calling it applied philosophy.
It's a huge claim. They're not just saying it's a nice idea to think about on a Sunday.
No, they're presenting it as a piece of functional engineering for your life. So let's get into the engine room.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with that first step, the pause. Now, when the sources talk about pausing, it's really important to understand this isn't passive. It's not just, stalling.
Right. It's not inaction. They define it as a deliberate, structured action, one that's designed to trigger very specific, very immediate effects inside your own head.
So what are those effects? What are the sources telling us is actually happening in that moment of stillness?
The most compelling function of the pause is mechanical. The sources say its immediate critical result is that it puts a brake on emotional baggage.
Emotional baggage. Okay, that's a term we hear all the time. But what does it mean in this specific framework? How does a pause actually engage that brake?
Think of it as any unresolved fear from the past, any resentment, anxiety, even a previous failure. It's all the stuff that automatically tries to latch on to the situation you're in right now.
Even if it's totally irrelevant.
Exactly. So say you get a sharply worded email from a colleague. The immediate unpaused reaction is probably fueled by every other time you felt slighted or judged. That's the baggage.
So the pause is like hitting an emergency disconnect switch. It just buys you those few seconds you need to create some space between the email itself and your ingrained emotional habit.
Precisely. It creates that friction because if you react purely from that historical frustration, you're not actually responding to the email in front of you. You're responding to a ghost.
And rational thought, I guess, needs that separation.
It requires it. The moment you pause, you are actively identifying and unhooking that unnecessary weight.
But the sources seem to suggest it's more than just being still. There's an internal confrontation happening. They describe the pause as forcing this unavoidable moment where we face ourselves.
And that's the self-awareness piece. It's crucial. When you deliberately cut that line between the stimulus and your reaction, you strip away all the external noise.
And you're left with what? Just you.
You're left alone with the immediate reality of your own body. The rising heat in your face, the pounding heart, that familiar surge of defensiveness.
That sounds, honestly, pretty vulnerable. You're forced to just sit there and acknowledge that these non-present forces, the baggage, are trying to hijack your decision.
It's the prerequisite self-check. You have to recognize, okay, this feeling of defensiveness isn't actually about this email. It's a stored pattern from 10 years ago. If you can't see that, you can't discard it.
So the pause is the moment you name the ghost before you decide whether or not to follow it.
Beautifully put, yes. It acknowledges that the biggest resistance isn't external. It's our own internal tendency to fall back into those old emotional ruts.
Okay, but let's be real here. For a lot of people, facing ourselves, acknowledging the baggage, that's exhausting work. It would be so tempting to just stay in that pause state forever.
And the philosophy knows that. It pivots right there. The pause is necessary, but it's just creating a vacuum. The sources are very clear. We can't stay in that vacuum forever.
Because that's just another kind of mistake.
Stalling, yeah. Analyzing without ever choosing. So the framework demands forward motion. It brings us to the second equally important step. We must choose.
Right. You've braked the emotional baggage, you've faced yourself, and now you have to act. And this is where things get really, I'd say, radical. There's a rule here designed to keep the past from creeping back in.
This is where it becomes so practical, almost severe. The truth that governs this second step is simple. You can only choose from what is present.
And within this system, That is an inviolable law.
It
I
is.
think this is the hardest part for people to really get because our brains are basically prediction machines. We use memory, we use past experience to make choices. So how on earth do the sources define present in a way that excludes all that?
They ground it completely in the immediate sensory world. The philosophy asserts that valid choices can only come from one place. Yeah. From what you can see, hear, touch, smell. That's it.
Wow. Okay, so that anchors decision-making to a handful of verifiable, tangible data points.
Yeah.
It means if I'm in a meeting, my choice has to be based on the tone of voice I'm actually hearing or the document I'm literally touching.
Exactly. And that limitation, that constraint, is a revolutionary act. It
Mm.
automatically filters out almost all worry, all speculation, all resentment.
Because you can't see your colleagues' future bad intentions.
Nor can you physically touch the time they annoyed you last year. So those things become invalid inputs for the choice you have to make right now.
Okay, let me push back on that, though.
Yep.
Because it seems to strip away our accumulated wisdom.
Hmm.
If I touched a hot stove last week, isn't the memory of that burn, which is a past event, absolutely necessary for me to make a good choice now?
That is the essential tension, isn't it? The source material is stark here. It has a necessary corollary. You cannot choose from the past. Because, in their view, the past no longer exists. It's inert. It's an invalid resource for a current choice. If you choose based on an old wound, you're choosing from a ghost.
So how do you differentiate between useful learning, like the hot stove, and inert baggage? Where's the line?
It's a subtle but profound distinction. The pain of the hot stove from last week is not the input for your choice today.
Okay,
The learning from that pain is what has sharpened your present perception. So the choice now is based on the sensory data of this moment. I see the red heat coils glowing. The learning just helps you process that sensory data as danger.
I see. So the past doesn't offer choices, but it sharpens the lens we use to see the choices available right now. The difference is choosing based on the memory of the burn versus the current perception of the heat.
You've got it. The moment you start trying to act on the memory or the feeling attached to that memory, you've slipped out of the present. You've let the baggage back in.
And by limiting the input to what you can sense, you keep the decision grounded in a verifiable current reality.
It makes the choose step as objective as possible. It transforms decision-making from managing complex feelings into, well, collecting data points.
Which moves it from the realm of abstract worry to physical reality.
Worry is almost always about a non-existent future or an inert past. This system just forces you to operate where life is actually happening, right here, right now.
All right, let's bring the two steps back together. We have the pause, creating separation, and then the choose, which forces direction based on sensory data.
Yeah.
What happens when you do this over and over? What's the systemic effect?
The consequence is an active reorientation. Every single time you perform this action pause, then choose from the present, you are actively and necessarily being pulled back into the present.
And that continuous cycle is what makes it a mechanism, not just a trick.
Right. You're not just making one good decision. You are, moment by moment, training your mind to live where your power actually is, in your immediate sensory reality.
That gets to the heart of why they call it applied philosophy. It's not a theory.
Exactly. Theory is something you think about. It's like reading an engineering manual and just contemplating the principles of stress and load.
And applied philosophy is actually building the bridge.
That's it. It's the action itself. Because this framework demands constant, practical execution, it's not just a system of ideas, it's a behavioral loop that continuously reorients you. It's functional.
That distinction changes everything. It means the success of this isn't measured by how well you understand the concepts, but how often you actually do the two steps.
The philosophy is in the performance of the act itself. And the challenge it presents to you, listening, is to see those moments of high resistance, when you're frustrated, when you want to lash out, as opportunities.
Opportunities to run the mechanism and strengthen the skill.
Exactly.
So as you move through your day, let's just quickly run through the core steps one more time. If you feel triggered or stuck, first, you pause.
You actively put a brake on that emotional baggage and you face the reality of what's happening in your own body.
And once you have that separation, you choose.
And you choose strictly from what's real right now. What can you see, hear, touch, or smell that provides valid input for this decision? If you can't sense it now, it's not a resource.
This brings up a really powerful final thought, building on that tension between the past and the present. If the sources are so strict that we cannot choose from the past because it no longer exists, then what is the true function of memory?
That's the question, isn't it? If every choice has to be based on pure present sensory input, we have to rethink how we integrate learning. We have to ask ourselves, does learning live in the memory of an event that's now invalid? Or is true learning defined as the permanent, seamless translation of that experience into a sharper, higher resolution perception of the present moment?
That is a fundamental challenge. It forces you to stop dwelling on past failures and instead focus entirely on the quality of your observation right now. A compelling thought to chew on. We'd encourage you to try this two-step system. Pause, then choose in your very next decision.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the applied philosophy of the moment.